It began on a cold, fog-draped evening in London, the kind that swallows street lamps whole and presses a chill into the bones. My receptionist knocked, voice softened by the hush of Harley Street. "Dr. Edward, your new patient is here." I set aside the previous file and glanced at the clock. 7 years is a long time to carry a memory, yet that night remained strangely near. As if I could still smell the damp wool coats and hear the city's distant tires hissing across wet asphalt. She entered slowly. Hanna, 22, a psychology student, moved like someone who had traveled too far in too little light. The shadows beneath her eyes looked almost bruised, as if sleeplessness had inked its signature there. Her hands trembled when she sat. I have met exhaustion before, its many disguises, but this had a gravity that pulled at the air itself. "Hanna," I said gently, "tell me what brings you here." Her voice arrived as a whisper pealing from a cliff. "I am afraid of sleep, Dr. Edward, not because I cannot find it, but because when it finds me, I cannot move. I wake and my body is stone. Something presses on my chest heavy. Crewland, the room turns into a cliff edge. I'm at the rim, staring into a depth that wants me. I offered the usual assurances. Sleep paralysis, I explained, is a known phenomenon. The brain wakes before the body does. The machinery stalls between dream and motion. It is terrifying, yes, but not dangerous. She shook her head. This isn't ordinary. Her certainty unsettled me. I leaned forward. What do you mean? This feels personal, she said. It isn't a weight. It's an embrace I recognize and don't understand. Outside, the fog pressed itself against the window, dimming the street into a smear of pewter. In the soft cone of my desk lamp, the brass nameplate, Edward Ainsley, MD, caught a quiet gleam. I guided Hanna through her history, recent stressors, medications, family, the shape of her days. The data formed a tidy grid. The feeling did not. "Tell me everything," I said. "Slowly, we'll walk it together." She drew in a breath that looked like courage. "It began after I moved," she said, "and after I heard a voice that wasn't made for ears. It spoke inside my head, soft as smoke, certain as dawn, rising." Hanna's eyes drifted away from mine, fixing on the carpet, as though the pattern there might anchor her trembling thoughts. "It started last winter," she said. "The first night, I thought it was a dream. I was lying in bed when suddenly I woke up. At least I thought I woke up. My eyes were open. I could see the ceiling, the faint glow of the streetlight bleeding through the curtains, but my body, it wouldn't move." She clenched her hands in her lap, knuckles whitening. I tried to breathe deeply, but every breath felt trapped, like someone was pressing their weight across my chest. I wanted to scream, to call out, but nothing came. My throat was locked. All I could do was watch the shadows shift around me. I nodded gently, recognizing the textbook account of sleep paralysis. Yet her voice carried a tremor that suggested something far beyond the usual terror. "What happened then?" I asked. At first, I thought it was only fear. But then I felt it again night after night. The paralysis, the pressure, and eventually, the sense of someone being there. She looked up, her gaze sharp, demanding that I believe. It wasn't just the vague dread of a nightmare. Dr. Root was tangible. The weight pressing me down didn't feel random. It felt like arms. Arms holding me, wrapping around me, but not with comfort. With possession. The room seemed to narrow around her words. "You're saying it felt like someone specific?" I asked. She hesitated, lips trembling. "Yes, familiar. That's why I know this isn't just in my head." It wasn't faceless fear. It was her. The pronoun hung heavy, undefined, and yet somehow more disturbing than clarity. I pressed carefully. "Who, Hanna? Who do you believe it was?" She swallowed hard, her voice cracking as if the answer itself might tear her apart. "Mrs. Richards. My flatmate, Emily's mother. But she's been dead for years." Her statement cut through the silence like a shard of glass. I had expected anxiety, trauma, perhaps some hallucinations. Not this. Not a name, not an identity. I leaned back, momentarily caught between the duty of science and the tremor of something stranger. "You believe a spirit is visiting you in these episodes?" She met my eyes without wavering. "No, doctor, I don't just believe it. I feel it. And every night, she comes closer." The name lingered in the air, heavy and unsettling. Mrs. Richards. I had never heard it before. Yet Hanna spoke it with the familiarity of someone recalling a living presence. "Tell me about her," I said, keeping my tone calm, though my mind was already searching for rational footholds. Hanna clasped her trembling hands tighter. Emily, my closest friend at university, lost her mother 3 years ago. Mrs. Richards was kind, gentle, the sort of woman who made you feel safe the moment she smiled at you. Emily adored her. Everyone did. She died suddenly, a heart attack, I think. I never met her when she was alive. Only heard stories. I scribbled notes slowly, giving Hanna space to continue. 3 months ago, Emily and I moved into a flat in East London. It's an old Victorian house, creaky floors, narrow staircases, the kind of place that seems to breathe at night. I thought nothing of it at first. But soon after we moved in, the episodes began. And when the paralysis came, the weight I felt on my chest, it wasn't a faceless force. It began to take shape. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the lamplight. At first, it was only an outline, a shadow hovering near the bed. But each time, it grew clearer. A familiar the curve of her shoulders, the way she held her arms. Eventually, I realized it was Emily's mother, Mrs. Richards. I frowned, though gently. But you said you never met her in life. How could you recognize her? That's what terrifies me, Hanna whispered, because when the shadow came, my mind didn't guess it knew. As if I had always known her. As if some hidden memory had awakened inside me. The fog outside thickened, muffling the street sounds until the clinic felt like an island cut, adrift from reason. I studied Hanna, weighing each word, each tremor of her hands. You're certain it isn't just suggestion? Perhaps Emily showed you photographs, spoke of her mother so often that your mind conjured the image during these episodes. Hanna shook her head quickly. No, Emily keeps very few photos. She avoids talking about the loss, it hurts her too much. And yet, every time I'm trapped in my bed, I feel Mrs. Richards' arms tightening around me. Not to harm me, but to keep me. She shivered, her voice breaking to a whisper. Doctor, how can I dream of someone I never knew, yet feel her touch, as though she's alive? For a moment, the room was still. The ticking clock on my wall seemed louder, each second pressing itself into the silence between us. Hanna's confession had already stretched the borders of science. But what she said next pushed them further still. One night, she whispered, her eyes clouding as though she were reliving it. Something changed. It wasn't just the weight, or the shape in the dark. There was light. I repeated, skeptical but curious. Yes, a dim, milky glow. Not from the window, not from a lamp. It came from nowhere, spreading across the room like mist. And in that glow, I heard her. But it wasn't sound in the way we hear voices. Doctor, it didn't travel through my ears. It bloomed inside my head, soft but clear. Her lips trembled, but the words poured out. She said, tell my daughter, I am happy, and I will always watch over her. The hair on the back of my neck prickled despite myself. It was too precise, too deliberate to dismiss as a hallucination. I studied Hanna carefully, watching for signs of embellishment or hysteria. But her voice was steady, though low. Her eyes brimmed with the kind of sincerity that doesn't beg to be believed, simply exists. And what did you do? I asked. I cried, she admitted, tears now spilling fresh. I cried harder than I ever have in my life. Because the voice wasn't frightening, it was tender, familiar, loving. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that it was Mrs. Richards speaking. I leaned back, forcing myself into the role of the rationalist. Our brains, Hanna, are remarkable storytellers. Under stress, during altered states of consciousness, they weave illusions that feel utterly real. Sleep paralysis is fertile ground for such experiences. She shook her head firmly. No, doctor, you don't understand. That voice wasn't imagined. It wasn't mine. It carried warmth I'd never known, and a grief that wasn't mine to bear. Her words pressed against my mind, demanding entry past my defenses. I wanted to remind her of science, of neurotransmitters misfiring, of dreams colliding with wakefulness. But beneath all my reasoning, a sliver of doubt formed thin, sharp, and unyielding. That night, as I wrote my notes after she left, I found my pen pausing mid-sentence. I, who had built a career on evidence, data, and certainty, caught myself asking a question I wasn't ready to face. What if the dead really could speak through the living? I scheduled a full sleep study for Hanna the following week. If there was an explanation, I was determined to find it within the boundaries of science. At the clinic, she lay connected to wires and electrodes, her brainwaves, heart rhythm, and oxygen levels carefully monitored as she drifted into slumber, hour after hour. I observed the screen, expecting anomalized disrupted REM cycles, irregular spikes, perhaps even seizure activity. Yet everything appeared frustratingly normal. Her sleep architecture was textbook perfect. No arrhythmias, no neurological glitches. A clean slate. The following morning, I reviewed the data with her. "There is nothing wrong with your body," I explained, sliding the report across the desk. "No evidence of disease, no neurological dysfunction. Physiologically, you are as healthy as any young woman your age." Her expression did not brighten with relief. Instead, she looked defeated. "So then why does it keep happening? Why does she keep coming?" "Because your mind is exhausted," I replied firmly. "Prolonged stress can distort perception. You move to a new home, a different environment. Old houses creak and breathe. Combine that with academic pressures, disrupted sleep, and stories about your flatmate's mother. You created a phantom in the night." Her lips tightened, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "But how do you explain the voice?" The words she spoke. "A hallucination," I countered, perhaps too quickly. The brain can craft entire conversations while half asleep. Dreams and waking thought bleed together. It feels external, but it's only internal. She shook her head. "No, doctor, you keep searching for errors in my body, but this isn't about my body. Something else is happening, and you don't want to admit it." Her conviction unsettled me more than I wished to reveal. I cleared my throat, shifting my glasses higher on my nose. "Hanna, I understand what you feel is real, but feelings aren't facts. Trust me when I say that medicine has seen thousands of cases like yours, and every single one had a rational explanation." Still, as I spoke the words, I felt their hollowness echo in my chest, because there was something in Hannah's unwavering gaze, something unshaken by my rehearsed logic, that whispered otherwise. That night, long after she left, I replayed her words in my head. "She keeps coming." My rational mind called it anxiety, but deep inside, another part of my quiet, buried wondered if denial was the easier explanation. 2 nights later, Hanna returned to my office. She looked more fragile than before, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red from tears, or lack of sleep, perhaps both. She sat down without speaking at first, clutching the straps of her bag as though it were a lifeline. Finally, she whispered, "It happened again." I steepled my fingers, steadying my voice. "Another episode of paralysis." She nodded. "Yes, but this time it was different. Stronger." The voice didn't just whisper comfort. It gave me instructions. That word unsettled me. "What kind of instructions?" Hanna leaned forward, lowering her voice as though the walls themselves might be listening. "She told me to tell Emily something. She said, my locket is in the hidden compartment of the old wardrobe. It was never lost." A chill threaded through me, despite the warmth of the room. "A locket," I repeated, trying to keep my tone clinical. "Yes," Hanna said firmly. She was specific. She said Emily must know it's still there. I tapped my pen against my notebook, forcing myself to frame this rationally. "You're certain you had no prior knowledge of such a locket? No mention from Emily? No story? No half-forgotten detail you might have pieced together?" Hannah's eyes blazed with weary defiance. "No, doctor, I swear to you, I knew nothing about it. Why would I invent something so precise?" I leaned back, weighing her words. Hallucinations often weave from fragments of memory, but the specificity of a hidden compartment unsettled me. My rational mind clung to explanations, suggestion, confabulation, the brain's uncanny ability to fabricate convincing illusions. Yet a darker question pulsed beneath my reasoning. What if she was telling the truth? "I still believe this is the mind under stress," I said, though even to my own ears, the words sounded thin. "Sleep paralysis blurs reality. It's possible. Your subconscious built this story from pieces you don't consciously recall." Her voice broke, trembling but insistent. "Doctor, why won't you believe me? This isn't a dream. It isn't my imagination. Someone is trying to speak through me." For the first time, I had no ready response. I could only watch her, caught between the fortress of science and the shadow of something beyond its walls. Our sessions began to feel less like doctor and patient, and more like 2 adversaries circling the edges of belief. I clung to my training, to medical literature, and the weight of proven fact. Hanna clung to her experience, raw and immovable, as if my skepticism itself deepened her isolation. One evening, she arrived pale and trembling, her hair uncombed, her hands fidgeting with the zipper of her coat. "I told Emily," she blurted before I could even greet her. My pen froze above the page. "Told her what?" "About the voice. About her mother. About the locket." I exhaled slowly. Hanna, I warned. You sharing these details could frighten her unnecessarily. What did she say? At first, Hanna said, her voice shaking, she was angry. She thought I was cruel, inventing stories about the one person she still mourns. But when she calmed down, I described it exactly: the wardrobe, the secret compartment. She went pale. Doctor, she told me her mother once mentioned keeping something hidden, but Emily never found it. She thought it was just a passing remark. I shifted in my chair, discomfort crawling beneath my skin. That doesn't prove anything. Memories can be flexible. Emily may have unconsciously given you clues over time, and your mind stitched them together during paralysis episodes. No, Hanna said firmly, her eyes flashing. You don't understand. I didn't know any of this. I couldn't have. We sat in silence, the gulf between us widening. I wanted to tell her she was safe, that science had answers, that hallucinations could feel as real as sunlight. But another part of me, the part that noticed the conviction in her tone, was less certain. Hanna, I said at last, even if what you're experiencing feels real, giving it power could make your condition worse. The more you believe in it, the deeper it will take root. You must fight to see it as illusion. Her face hardened, tears welling in her eyes. You don't hear me at all, do you? This isn't illness. This is contact. Her words struck like a stone against glass. I looked at her, a young woman breaking under the weight of something I couldn't name, and realized we were standing on opposite sides of an invisible line. Science on one side, mystery on the other, and neither of us willing to cross. A week later, an envelope arrived at my office, the kind of thick, cream-colored stationery people seldom use anymore. Hanna's handwriting trembled across the front. I opened it with the practiced detachment of a physician. But what I read shook that composure apart. Dr. Edward, the letter began. I told Emily everything. She was frightened, then furious, but eventually she agreed to check the wardrobe. We searched it together. Hanna described how Emily dragged the heavy Victorian wardrobe away from the wall, dust rising in choking clouds. Its doors groaned like old bones when they opened. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just folded linen and forgotten boxes. But then Emily noticed a seam along the back panel, almost invisible in the dim light. With shaking hands, she pried it open. Behind it lay a narrow recess, hidden away for decades, and there, wrapped in a piece of faded cloth, was a delicate gold locket. Hanna's words blurred with emotion on the page. Emily froze, her eyes wide. She whispered, "This was my mother's. We thought it was stolen years ago." She opened it, and inside was a tiny photograph of her as a child, smiling in her mother's arms. Tears poured down her face. She kept saying, she wanted me to have this. She never forgot me. I set the letter down, my pulse quickening. For all my years in medicine, I could not explain how Hanna could have known about the locket, let alone the hidden compartment. There had been no clues, no way for her to fabricate such precision. Hanna's closing words struck me hardest. From that night onward, the paralysis has not returned. I sleep peacefully. I feel lighter, as though the shadow that clung to me has finally let go. Perhaps Mrs. Richards only wanted her daughter to find what was lost. Perhaps now she rests. I folded the letter carefully, my hands unsteady. The office around me felt suddenly foreign, the books and charts on the shelves like props on a stage. For years I had built my practice upon the certainty of science. Yet here was a truth that did not fit within its lines. The case, I thought, was rooted in illusion, had slipped, quietly and impossibly, into the realm of the real. In the weeks that followed, Hanna did not return to my office. I received only occasional updates in the form of brief notes, each one brimming with a calm I had never seen in her before. She wrote of restful nights, of waking refreshed, of laughter, returning to her conversations with Emily. "I sleep like a child now," one letter read. No shadows, no voices, no paralysis, only silence, soft and merciful. I think Mrs. Richards found peace once Emily discovered the locket, and in some way, she gave peace to me as well. It was a transformation beyond anything medicine could account for. Patients do not simply shed sleep paralysis overnight. Symptoms lessen, improve gradually with therapy or medication, but vanish entirely. No, not without explanation. Yet there it was, undeniable. Hanna's torment had ended. And strangely, I felt relief myself, not just as her doctor, but as a man who had stood on the edge of something inexplicable and seen it resolve with an elegance no treatment could match. Still, her case haunted me. In quiet hours at the clinic, I caught myself wondering, If this was not illness, then what had it been? Was it grief bleeding through the walls of the living into the realm of the dead? Was it a mother's love refusing to be silenced by death? I began to notice things I once dismissed. Patients speaking of dreams that seemed too sharp, too predictive. Stories whispered in hospital corridors of last words carried by winds no one else heard. For years, I had filed such tales away under imagination, stress, or neurochemical disturbance. But Hanna's case lodged like a thorn in that tidy certainty. Her final note came in spring, written in a steadier hand than the first. Thank you, Dr. Edward, for listening, even if you didn't believe. Perhaps one day you will. I owe you gratitude nonetheless, because your care gave me the strength to endure until the message was complete. And now, finally, I can live. I placed that letter in my desk drawer, unable to throw it away. It was not evidence, not data, but something weightier. A reminder that sometimes healing arrives from places science cannot chart. And sometimes peace comes not from medicine, but from mystery. I still keep Hanna's letters, folded carefully, in a leather-bound journal, as though preserving them might also preserve the part of me that changed because of her. Her case became a quiet landmark in my career, not something I spoke of at conferences or published in journals, but a story that lived between my heartbeats. For years I had carried myself as a man of certainty. Science was my compass, my fortress. I believed every riddle of the mind had an answer hidden in neural circuits, in chemical balances, in the elegant machinery of sleep. But Hanna's experience, her voice, her conviction, the locket in the wardrobe dismantled that fortress, stone by stone. I tried, at first, to reason it away. Perhaps she stumbled across some clue she didn't consciously recall. Perhaps Emily, in grief, remembered things inaccurately and unconsciously confirmed Hanna's words. Perhaps coincidence dressed itself in the clothes of miracle. Those explanations gave me comfort for a time. Yet every time I reread her final line, perhaps one day you will believe, my doubts began again. What unsettled me most was not the locket itself, but what happened afterward. The healing. The paralysis vanished. The fear lifted. Hanna found rest. How could belief alone undo a condition that often torments patients for years? If this was illusion, it was the strangest, most merciful illusion I had ever seen. So I began to withdraw. Slowly, quietly, I limited my practice. I still treated patients, still listened to their stories, but with less of the arrogance of certainty and more of the humility of a witness. Because what Hanna taught me was this: science is vast, but it does not own the whole truth. There are rooms it cannot enter, doors it has not yet built the keys for. I do not know if Mrs. Richards truly reached across the veil to comfort her daughter. I cannot prove it, nor disprove it. But I know this. Hanna walked into my office, a young woman unraveling at the seams of terror. And she walked out weeks later, restored by something I could not give her. And so I confess, for all my years, as a physician, the case that haunts me most is not the one I solved, but the one I could not. Hanna's story remains my reminder that the human mind is not only biology, but mystery. And sometimes, mystery heals where medicine cannot.